little longer.
I started recording.
Yeah, you can stream it live, and I know that Facebook takes a little longer. That's okay. Thank you. Namaste to all of you. A very warm welcome to this evening's webinar. Friends, today we have Dr. Jagannath Panda ji. Before I formally introduce him, he's a China expert, and we are very fortunate to have him with us today. But before I formally introduce him, it's my privilege to, speak a few words about our own organization, Pragna Bharati. Most of you are already aware of it, but those of you who have come for the first time on the call, for your benefit, a few words about our organization. Friends, Pragna Bharati is an intellectual forum which was founded almost 30 years back, 29 years back actually. This was the initial founders were five intellectuals, our chairman being Dr. Hanuman Chaudhary ji. He is a Padma Shri awardee, former chairman of VSNL. He's almost 90 years young. He's a prolific writer. He was a former advisor to the government of Andhra Pradesh on IT. And he's been consistently, relentlessly fighting for the cause of Bharat. He is the chairman of Pragna Bharati. And then our Ram Madhav ji, who is currently the National General Secretary of BJP, he was also the founding member. In fact, he was the inspiration behind Pragna Bharati. B.S. Sharma ji, who is a pharmaceutical professional. And we had two more stalwarts who are no more with us, Vakati Panduranga Rao ji and Harihara Sharma Garu. These five of them started Pragna Bharati almost 29 years back. And Nirmala Sitharaman ji was one of the first general secretaries of Pragna Bharati. In the course of these 28, 29 years, we have done several programs, conferences, seminars, workshops, and many programs. Many stalwarts walked our podium. Somebody like Vajpayee ji, Advani ji, Arun Jaitley ji, Sushma Swaraj ji, I mean, you can name it. Francois Gauthier, David Frawley, even Chandrababu Naidu ji, Jaya Jaitley ji. I mean, huge. I mean, in 30 years, we had a deluge of knowledge that has spoken from our podium. And then, friends, we also run an English magazine by name Bharatiya Pragna. It's a monthly English magazine. This is, of course, not available on the stands. Please do subscribe to it. It shall be delivered to you to your residential address. And we request you kindly to like, subscribe, and share our social media assets, our Twitter handle, our Facebook page, our Instagram and Telegram pages, as well as our YouTube channel. All these webinars are uploaded in YouTube, and those of you who have missed part of it, or you want to share it with some of your friends at a later date, kindly do share the links with them, and then we can spread this message of knowledge across the country and beyond. If you have something to talk to us, contribute to us, or you want to be part of a movement, please do write to us at our email ID, info@pragnabharati.com. And for the benefit of all of you, we are doing an English webinar 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Whereas our unit from Karimnagar does Telugu webinars on the rest of the days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. So that's how we are doing it. And for the past 4 months since the lockdown started, between the two units, we have done more than almost 140, 150 webinars we have done. And thanks to all the speakers who have graciously agreed to speak on our platforms, as well as all the audience who have been supporting us all these while. Friends, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you Dr. Jagannath Panda ji. He's a research fellow, and he heads the East Asia Center as a coordinator at MP IDSA. Friends, IDSA has been known to most of you, but then MP is Manohar Parrikar. It has been now added, Manohar Parrikar ji's name has been added to IDSA. And he joined IDSA in 2006. And Pandaji is in charge of East Asia Center's academic and administrative activities, including the Track 2 and Track 1.5 dialogues with China, Japan, Korea, and other think tanks around these countries. He's been a recipient of a prestigious award, that is V.K. Krishnamenon Memorial Gold Medal in 2000 from the Indian Society of International Law and Diplomacy in New Delhi. Pandaji is also an author. He's written several books: India-China Relations, Politics of Resources, Identity of Authority in Multipolar World, and many other books. He's also an author of China's Path to Power, Party, Military, and the Politics of State of Transition. He is a very distinguished voice as far as China is concerned. And we have very, very few who have studied China at close quarters. Pakistan, we would find a baggage of names, but for China, we would probably find it difficult to count on a single hand. That's the kind of number that we have on China. Though China has been our adversary for ages, and we knew our bigger challenges with China and not with Pakistan, somehow we have ignored China for far too long. And Jagannath Panda ji is one such expert on China. We have done a few talks on China from people like Professor Shrikant Pandapalli ji and others. But then, this is something which is an ongoing situation. The Galwan Valley issue, or the Pangong Tso Lake issue, what has happened with India banning the apps, and yesterday the Rafale induction into Indian Air Force, which has given a huge boost to our air power. Not that we were any weak before. China was anyway weak on the air and naval front. They were probably strong on the army, armed forces on the ground level, but then Air Force, we were anyway stronger. But then Rafale is a game changer. So in the last 3-4 weeks, we have seen a significant change in the way China has been behaving, in the way world is behaving towards China, and the dynamics are changing very fast. Even now, the war clouds are not gone. Probably 40,000-50,000 strong soldiers are lined up on both sides of the line of actual control. And we are still heavily dependent on China for many of our inputs, ingredients, be it technology or in the fields of pharmaceutical and others. So we cannot wish it away tomorrow morning. We have to deal with China. And how do we deal with it? It's not that we just ban a TikTok here and there, or some app in our cell phone, and then we are done away with China. No. So we cannot ignore China, yet we need to handle them, tackle them. So today, friends, that's the topic that we have chosen. How do we tame this dragon? And who else but Jagannath Panda ji? Ironically, or the coincidence-wise, panda is a very pet animal even for China. China produces, they show up their pandas as their soft power as well. But our panda is different. Panda is a very respectable name from Orissa, who are Purohits of Pandits of Jagannath Puri, and they do a lot of service in the honor of Jagannath. So we are so glad and we are fortunate to have Jagannath Panda ji amongst us this evening. So I leave the floor to Panda ji.
Thank you, Giridhar ji. Namaskar to all the attendants, and namaskar to Pragna Bharati for extending this invitation. I am personally very honored to be here. I also thank Giridhar ji for this kind note about myself. I don't know whether I deserve this kind introduction and kind note, but I'm really thankful and grateful to you and Pragna Bharati for inviting me for this talk. At the outset, let me make it clear that the views that I'm going to share with you is going to be my personal views. This is nothing to do with my institute, even though on most of the issues I do share the echoes of the national spirit, the national thinking, and as I have written about China, my line of thinking is definitely with the nation and with the country and with the current government. So definitely there is a parallel, but the views belongs to me here, and the views of a scholarly views. This should be seen more from an academic and scholarly perspective that I have gathered on my research over the last 15 to 16 years here on China, investing in MPIDSM, Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, and also in JNU my 5 years as a PhD candidate and as an MPhil student in Delhi University. As Giridharji rightly pointed out that I have written 2 books so far on China, and my 3rd book is currently undergoing, which should be finished by the end of this year. I have edited several books, maybe 8 or 9 books I have edited, and few research articles I have published. So some of my views are already established, and my views about China is already known to some of those people who are familiar with me in the research and academic or in the strategic communities in Delhi and across India. What I will do today is that, as the topic is that how the nation should prepare for a rising dragon, how India should really, how Bharat should really respond to China. I will keep it very objective and short, so that after my talk, we can discuss and make it quite interactive, and I can share my thoughts. So let's start with, very brief 5 points in my talk. The very first thing, what kind of power we are really looking at China today? What kind of power it is really today? And the way it is emerging, how should we really look at China? Now, this is a very complicated question, because if you go to the history of China, every moment try to read it on the way the Chinese are rising, the way Chinese have behaved with the rest of the world, the way Chinese have actually grown as a power, as a country, there will be different interpretation. But this particular period is very different and distinct, because China was never so powerful. It was powerful in terms of its history and civilization, but it was never powerful in terms of military muscles and economic muscles. So therefore, today we are seeing a different China, and therefore the interpretation of China has to be properly drawn. So therefore, the question is that what kind of power it is really? Now, there are 2 issues we should keep it in mind, that when we are trying to understand that what kind of power China really is, there are 2 issues that we need to link it with. One, the kind of president it is having. The head of the government, the head of the party, the head of the constitution, that is the president of China. The general secretary of the party, that is the president of China. So who is the president? That matters. So China as a power is very much personal centric, personality centric, and that's how it is linked with the leadership of China. And therefore, the spotlight should be on Xi Jinping. The second thing is that it's about how China is responding to the outside world, the behavioral pattern of China. So that will also give us a judgment of what kind of power it is. So let me examine these 2 points. First, I'll come to about Xi Jinping. There are many literatures have been written about Xi Jinping, that he's a very strong leader. He's a leader after Mao Zedong, who is emerging as really the generation of leaders of Chinese history, political history, and he's going to continue. While all of these assertion or the arguments that has been established is true, but if we try to understand it critically, one get an impression that he is not really a strong leader, that the way he appears to be. What should be the hallmark of a strong leader? The hallmark of a strong leader is to protect the interest of the nations, to defend the national security line of thinking, while being a large-hearted leader, try to offer to the world and trying to extend the, the goodness of its own country. We don't really see that in Xi Jinping. So for me, while academically I would like to argue that he is the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, he is the PLA chief, he is the constitutional head, so he is the president of China, so therefore he is very powerful. But on a conventional note, I'll try to critically examine this aspect by saying that he is actually a very weak leader. Now, why do I say he is a weak leader? Now, the, the mark of a weak leader is you don't know how to respond or address to the crisis. Today, you see, the Chinese have started the coronavirus, the COVID-19, and they don't know how to deal with the crisis, neither within China nor internationally. They are a permanent five country. They are a second largest economy in the world. They have a strong foreign policy outreach. Still, they are a fragile nation. They cannot bear the criticism. So, therefore, I do call Xi Jinping as a weak leader. The second point that I mentioned is that the China's behavioral pattern. Now, if you try to link the way Xi Jinping is responding and the way the Chinese government under Xi Jinping is responding to the whole episode of COVID-19 and the whole narratives of the national security issues that are critical to China, be it East China Sea, be it South China Sea, be it India-China border dispute, all of this suggests that this is not really the hallmark of a strong leadership. It's the hallmark of a weak leadership that is fragile. They don't know how to actually address the problematic issues that are emerging within China. So therefore, they are trying to divert the attention of the Chinese people to the outside world by creating problems with India, by creating problems with Japan, creating problems in the South China Sea. So this is what today we are seeing from the Chinese analysis. So the kind of power China is, it's not really a confident power. It might be really confident on its economy, even though currently its economy is really struggling and its economy is actually, like most of the global economy after the COVID-19, is struggling and has gone to the recession. The Chinese economy has also equally gone to the recession. But then the confidence is really missing. And the same kind of confidence is there in other powers. Look at the United States of America. Look at the way India under Prime Minister Modi is trying to advocate the Atmanirbhar Bharat. Look at the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Japan, the way he is trying to revive from time to time the Japanese economy. The same kind of confidence we don't really see from Xi Jinping. So it's a fragile country, it's a fragile power, and therefore I do see that China is a struggling power when it comes to today's China. So that's my interpretation of China as a power today. The second thing that we should be talking about China and China's approach towards India is that I think how China looks at India today. I think the way that is the critical point here, because that actually shapes most of the narratives about China and their relations. So if you try to understand, today's interpretation of China's on India is different from what it used to be a decade back or 2 decades back. Let's go back to 2002 or 2003. The late Prime Minister of India, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he went to China in 2003 and he delivered a speech in Beijing and he acknowledged the rise of China there. He acknowledged the rise of China by saying that China is a big economy, China is rising, China is a emerging technological power, and India and China should cooperate. And therefore, India started supporting most of the schemes of China. In fact, later years, what we saw, we started aligning with China in the BRICS formulations. Then we supported in 2015-16 the AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So the narrative from which actually late Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee established in 2003, that narrative continues, and India continued to support China all this while. But look at today, the way China is responding to India and behaving with it. That doesn't really shows that it's really a confidence. It's really a confident power. But the difference I would like to draw here is that in 2002-2003, there were a handful of the Chinese think tanks, universities, who were actually studying about India. Their impression about India was very minimal. Today, if you go to China, no matter which province, which part of China one is traveling, in each of the universities, in each of the think tanks, you will see India is being researched. There are India study centers or India related projects or South Asia Study Center or South Asia related projects. So that explains that China is looking at India in a new way. So the impression that China was having in 2002 or 2003 or at the beginning of 21st century is not the same today. So in Chinese formulation, India has risen as a power. But if you see the Chinese newspaper, the Communist Party of China tried to give a negative impression about India, that India is struggling democracy, India is struggling. So they try to portray a negative picture about India to the Chinese people. But in Chinese government formulation, India's power stature has risen substantially. And that's the thing we need to really note about. So today, the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government is looking at India in a new way. And I think that is one of the determining factor how China is behaving with India. So if 2002, 2003, China was a lesser confident power militarily, so they were unable to create much more problems for India. Today, it has emerged as a stronger military power and it has studied India much better. So they are creating these problems to keep India occupied with China and to keep India occupied on the boundary issues so that China can keep on diverting its public's attention to the international affairs, to the India affairs, to the border affairs, to the regional affairs, and Xi Jinping and the Communist Party can manipulate and rule within China. The third point here is that what is going to be China's future approach towards India? What is going to be Xi Jinping's future approach towards India? I think the approach that Xi Jinping and the Communist Party of China is going to employ towards India is going to be very, very aggressive. And we need to be really prepared about it. And why do I say that it is going to be very aggressive? They are realizing that under the current government and under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, India is moving very fast as a nation, as a country. India is rising as a power. India is actually rising as an Indo-Pacific power, building on capital, building on relationship capital. We are strengthening our ties with the US. We are strengthening our ties with Australia. Already we have established a strong, very strong ties with Japan. Our relationship with ASEAN and many other countries across the world is actually emerging and becoming very strong. And that is actually unnerving the Chinese. That is actually making China feel very nervous about India. So therefore, the aggressiveness of Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese leadership, including Xi Jinping's approach towards India, is only going to rise. Number 4, what would be China's approach towards India on the boundary disputes? I think that's one of the critical questions, that whether China is going to really attack India and what is going to be its approach towards the boundary dispute. Well, as I could see from today, is that the Chinese would never go for a war-like situation. They would not like to go for a war-like situation primarily because their original competition is with the United States. They want to be at the level of United States, so their target is the label where United States of America today is, given their economy, given their military capability, they want to compete with the US. So if they are going for a war with India, that will derail their economic growth, that will actually derail their governance process, that will put their economy under crisis, and that would not be a healthy situation for the Communist Party of China. So therefore, I don't really see that the Chinese Communist Party is going for a war with India. But then what was this Galwan incident all about? What was the Doklam incident was all about? What was the other incidents like the Chumar incident was all about when Xi Jinping came to India? We need to understand that these are the pressure tactics. These are the boiling points where Chinese Communist Party tries to keep its national security line thinking boiling and trying to create a nationalist feeling to bind the people to stay with the Communist Party's governance process. And this has been their strategy for last two decades or so, and this will continue. So eventually what we will see, China employing a limited war, a minuscule war, and probably the kind of incident we saw in Galwan will continue to emerge again and again in limited time. And we need to be absolutely prepared for that. So therefore, the kind of Chinese power we are witnessing in the border, the kind of Chinese power we are seeing under Xi Jinping, we need to be absolutely clear that they are rising as a concern, and we have to be mentally prepared to deal not only with Pakistan, but with a rising military power that China is pushing in the across the India-China. My last point, my fifth point is that will India-China relationship will ever return to its original track? And what would be the future of India-China relations? I think it is less to do with India. It is less to do with Bharat. It is more to do with China. It is more to do with the dragon. The way dragon behaves in India, I think India will reciprocate the dragon the same way. As the late Finance Minister of India, late Defense Minister of India, Sri Arun Jaitley ji once rightfully said that today's India is not actually the India of 1962. So what we are today seeing is that we will be responding hard to China, and China realizes that. China very much realizes that, and China really takes a strong note of India's capability, India's strike back capability, and India's resoluteness to hit back at different level to China. For example, in the Doklam, the way we responded to the Doklam incident and stood with the PLA for 73 days, that caught the Chinese into surprise. In fact, if you see, no other militaries in Asia has done to the PLA so far. So in that way, it was a strong warning to the Chinese that India will never compromise on the national security or territorial issues. When it comes to the Galwan incident, the same we saw, that even though there have been casualties on our part, things have never been compromised. So, and I think that's really sending a message to Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping is getting, the Xi Jinping administration is getting nervous about it. In fact, I'll add to the extent of saying that if we recall the Chumar Valley incident when it happened when Xi Jinping visited India in 2014, that time Prime Minister Modi actually warned and in a way passed a strong message to Xi Jinping by saying that, I'm just quoting the news which is available on the public, what many experts and the former diplomats have said already, that Prime Minister Modi said to Xi Jinping that, President Xi, do you think that when you are traveling here to India as my guest, should I assume that PLA is not under your control? That means it was a kind of a slap on the Chinese president to ask him that what kind of leader he is when he is here in India. How come the PLA can create problems in the India-China border? So Xi Jinping got defensive, and I think there must be some message going to Beijing back. And what we saw eventually, the Chumar incident was made. So the kind of power India has emerged, that has actually disturbed the Chinese political setup, the Chinese decision-making process, and therefore what we see today is that the Xi Jinping administration seeing India in a new light, and that has actually, in a way, shaping the India-China relations in a big. So therefore, I would suggest by saying that India-China relation will not really deteriorate to a kind of warlike situation. There will be continuity as we are borders. There will be continuity of a minimal political engagement, but it is not going to return to a normal kind of India-China relations in near future. Um, Time has come. We need to really revisit about our approach towards China, about each and every issue that we are talking about China, be it about accepting the Chinese goods, using the Chinese applications. As Giridharji rightly pointed out, we have already taken, 2 rounds of steps banning the Chinese applications. We should not really revisit on that decision. In fact, we should really promote indigenization program within India. We should have our own application process. We should take advantage of the Make in India, Skill India, Digital India that Prime Minister Modi is talking about, in order to promote these initiatives so that we can have our own productions house, not only on the applications in the software sector, but also in the hardware sectors. And I think that is the need of the hour. We can defeat China, we can balance out China, but on our own way, on our own way. So India, so Bharat needs to find its own way. We need to find a new path. We need to find our own Indian path. We need to really build a new Hindu way of thinking, the way our nation has evolved all this while, preserving the traditional value, applying the current and the contemporary values, and moving to the future. And I think that's the best way to tackle Dragon. I would not really suggest that we should go for a warlike situation. That is definitely not in our interest. We should be careful about that, because our economy needs to be recovered. Our country needs to be really come to the path of glory. We need to preserve our economy. We should talk about nation building, and we should focus on infrastructure building. We should empower our common citizens to give them better rights, better livelihood. That should be our priority, not to go for a war. But if Dragon invites us, we should respond it accordingly. So therefore, I would stop by saying that Bharat needs to find its own way of dealing with the Dragon, and we need to have our own Indianness, Indian way of thinking to tackle a rising China. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I welcome your comments and questions. Thank you.
Sure, Pandaji, thanks for that. While our audience, I request all of you to kindly use the hand button to raise the hand so that we can call you sequentially. But before I let them talk, I think I have a few questions, Pandaji, so that we'll keep the ball rolling. See, basically, we have issues boiling down to economy related. I think we can only impose costs on China only to a certain extent, not beyond. For instance, our active ingredients that come from China for our pharmaceutical industry, if you're going to ban that, then we're going to have a serious problem in our medical industry. Our industry could collapse in some at least critical components which we are dependent on China. We could have a challenge, and the cascading effect, the cost could go up and whatnot. So I don't think we will be able to really completely throw away China. I don't think any country can do away with it. Second, you see, they have literal monopoly on rare earth minerals, because of which, in fact, they had the audacity to even threaten USA that if you're going to ban our chips for Huawei, we can stop rare earths going back to you. I think Xi Jinping went to the factory of one of the rare earths factory just to kind of give a message to USA that we can do a lot. So these two are basic problem that India also has. We cannot wish away the pharmaceutical inputs from China, nor can we do away with the rare earth monopoly that China has got. So how do we handle these two issues?
I think as far as economic issues are concerned, I agree with you that a complete withdrawal from engaging with China is not really possible. And in an interdependent world, it is not also a practicable proposition. We should not be really doing that. We should limit our engagement with China. We should decouple in certain areas where China is emerging as a security concern, but not in all the areas. And I think that needs to be really noted up. Now, what are these areas where we should be really withdrawing from China, and what are the areas we should stay connected with China? As far as the bilateral mode of trade and economic contacts is concerned, we should directly stay in touch with China, and we should have the trade exchange going on. We should allow our companies to go to China and the Chinese companies come to India. Because unless you do that, the trade and economic contacts would not really sustain. But while saying that, we should be mindful of the Chinese softwares, the Chinese companies who are engaged in illegal activities. We have already taken a drastic step about Huawei, and we should not really welcome back Huawei. There are also agencies and institutions which are actually hoarding the Chinese ideas, Chinese monies, China's financial clouds into various think tanks, institutes, and university setups for research. We should put a check on that. Unless we do that, we cannot really, figure out where China actually posing a concern to India. More importantly, what we should be really concerned about is that illegal floating of the Chinese goods coming to India through the illegal means, maybe through the illegal trading points in the northeast India, or through the third country China. We should be really mindful of. About the rare earths issue and all, I think, yes, China has a forte there. China's strength point is about its minerals, rare earth materials. They know about that. But then we should also pass a message to China that it's not the only country which only produces such kind of rare earth. We should also look for alternative areas. We should also look for alternative regions where we could engage. What if China does not really decide to share with us tomorrow? They are threatening US, they will threaten India tomorrow. So we need to really find an alternative to this. So the alternative narrative has to be built in India, and we cannot run away from that practicality. But while saying that, I think if they are going to blackmail us, if they are going to impose a restriction on us, we also need to do the same. We need to revisit our positions on certain issues. For example, if China does not really, take care of our interest on the rare earth materials, on water in the Brahmaputra, Yalung Sangpo River, on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor projects, then we will be forced to revisit about South China Sea issue, about One China policy issues, but so many other complicated issues that could, about the human rights issue in Xinjiang, in Tibetan regions. India could really flush out some of these points against China internationally. And India could be an active promoter to some of these issues internationally. So we also need to pass all of these issues politically and diplomatically in order to maintain that edge against China. Thank you.
And another issue is with regard to the issue of China-Pakistan economic corridor that you just now mentioned. There is a view that this tension that they created on the line of actual control is actually to divert the Indian assets, armed assets, army assets, onto the line of actual control, so that the pressure on Gilgit-Baltistan and POJK is reduced. because there seems to be a view in Pakistan that India was preparing an action to take back these territories or do something. So they seem to have gone to PLA, requested them to drag our Indian assets onto the LAC, so that the Gilgit-Baltistan and CPEC is saved. I don't know. Maybe in your research, how did it come out? Maybe you can speak about it. I mean, the points that I hear is that I think Supreme Court of Pakistan consistently has been saying that you cannot hold elections in Gilgit-Baltistan because it is not a legal territory of Pakistan. But now, for the first time, they allowed the government to hold elections. That seems to be a Chinese pressure. So it looks like they will hold the elections in Gilgit-Baltistan, and they would say that this is the legal territory of Pakistan, make it a fifth province. And legally, once it becomes fifth province, as per the Pakistani constitution, they will give it on lease to China for 99 years. So then what happens is India will have to deal with China in Gilgit-Baltistan. Right now, it is just Pakistan. Now, China also will come and sit there. So this seems to be the target for China, and not exactly gaining a few hundred meters in Galwan or Pangong Tso. The aim seems to be to save CPEC and Gilgit-Baltistan, not necessarily Ladakh. What is your view on this? I mean, do you have any inputs on this? How do you read this, and what is your take on this whole narrative?
Two issues about China-Pakistan economic corridor. See, the Chinese have, in the process, they have made this issue as a prestige project for themselves, because this is one of the projects which is linked very closely with China's neighborhood strategy and Indian Ocean strategy, alternative strategies to come into South Asia and go into the Indo-Pacific regions. So the Chinese have, over the years, because of their campaigning about the Belt and Road initiatives, because of the international campaigning against Belt and Road initiatives, they have made the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, as a prestige issue. So somehow the Chinese have to make it sure, and they have to ensure that the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as a project should not struggle and should not go into crisis at any time. And the amount of money they have allotted is significant. While saying that, as you rightly pointed out, that they have built also enough pressure on the Pakistani establishments, not only to conduct election in Gilgit-Baltistan, but also to make the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor a success project. But originally, if you try to understand the views within the Pakistan itself and the kind of write-ups which are coming in the Pakistan mainstream newspaper, including in the Dawn, the Pakistani community themselves, they are not happy about China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. They do see that this project is not really taking any, is not really making any good to Pakistan. And this corridor project, this CPEC is not really a good project for Pakistan, because it is making Pakistan to become a bankruptcy country for China for forever. So therefore, there are critical voices within the Pakistans who are actually criticizing the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And we should be really vigilant and mindful about that. So therefore, the Chinese have, on the one hand, they have made it a prestige issue, and they are ensuring that the project should be working out and it should be said as a successful project. The Pakistan government is trying to do that. But on the other hand, the people of Pakistan are actually not in favor of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So there is a dilemma exists not only within the Chinese planning, but also in the China-Pakistan chemistry, because within Pakistan, there are different voices. Now, while saying that, we should be actually very careful, and we should not really lose out any opportunities to talk about the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. We have lost actually the China-Pakistan corridor. The initial idea about this corridor started in 2006, when the then Pakistani president actually went to China. And that time, the initial idea of China-Pakistan economic corridor came up. India should have objected at that time in 2006, when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was in power. But we actually lost the momentum. We did not really criticize the way we should be criticizing China. We should be criticizing Pakistan. We should be objecting about the China-Pakistan economic corridor. We lost, in fact, all these years. But today we are in a position to talk to the Chinese that that if they are not going to revisit the project, if they are not going to respect India's territorial integrity, what we call the China-Pakistan, the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, then they should be also prepared. China should be also prepared to have India's changed position on a range of issues, including on South China Sea, on One China policy, on many other issues. So, and I think we can create gradually these pressure building tactics when it comes to the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And we should not miss out any opportunity to do that from now on, because the way we have built the narrative in responding to China, we should do that. And we should continue to do that so that the real picture of China will come up, and China will give us the real picture in terms of how they are going to approach the whole issues. And at some point, they would like to discuss with India on these issues. In fact, we should be making it clear that if China does not really recognize Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is a disputed region from India's point of view, and India has a claim on the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, if China does not respect that, then India will also not respect the China's claim in the South China Sea. And we should be really making this point clear. Let's keep the projects, the economic dimension of China-Pakistan economic corridor aside. Well, let's play a tit for tat game when it comes to CPEC project. And I think the time has come to build that narrative and put China on a back. Thank you.
How do you see the latest move of China on Iran? They have now gone and paid, they've at least agreed for a $400 billion deal for 25 years with Iran. Some analysts say that this is probably because CPEC is not going anywhere. I think they're frustrated with Pakistan and they don't see that project to be viable at all because it hardly takes maybe a few hours for India to neutralize Gwadar tomorrow if there is any a problem with Pakistan. So that is not something which is viable for China, and so they have now gone ahead with Iran. So this is the view that people have for against some 50 to 60 billion dollars in CPEC. They are now promised $400 billion to Iran. Their the priorities seem to have shifted away from Pakistan to Iran. That's an analysis that people say. What's the truth in it? How do you read Xi Jinping or CCP's way of looking at it?
I think the Iran issue has bigger dimensions. It's not exactly linked with the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Yes, you are right that there is some issues involved in it. The way the CPEC is struggling, it should be worrying the Chinese because, as I mentioned, they have made it a prestige issue long time back. So definitely the way the China-Pakistan economic corridor is struggling to come up, it's not really a good picture for China. But I think the Iran issue is much bigger than that, and should not really be linking it with we should not be comparing apple with orange. The Iran issue is a very classical issue for Chinese foreign policy because Iran has been a country which has been very, very close to China and China's strategic thought. Let's understand the Iran issue from three angles. One is that if we try to understand from China's foreign policy point of view, after North Korea, which is the only military alliance partner of China, Iran is a close ally of China. Of course, like North Korea, between China and Iran, there is no treaty alliance as per se. But the way their relationship has actually come up, definitely Iran is a closer partner, closer ally of China. So it's more about managing an alliance in the Middle East because they know, the Chinese know that Iran Iran's biggest enemy and Iran's biggest concern is United States of America. So it builds a common ground for China to build on the relationship with Iran. The second issue here is that if we try to understand from the geographic point of view, why China is really serious about Iran and recently the way they have tried to reach Iran, to sideline India's interest in Iran. And I think that's the key issue here. And as you recall, we have our Chahabar port in Iran. And we are seeing Sahabar port as an alternative gateway to not only to Afghanistan and the Middle East region, but to the Central Asian region. And I think the Chinese have been taking this project of India, the Chahabar port, very, very seriously over the last 2 decades. So the Chinese are today thinking that if they can have a better deal with the Iranians and they can interfere and allow the Iranians to change their mind. And this is what we are seeing today. They are offering greater financial deal with to the Iranians, and they're engaging with a better terms and conditions with the Iranians on the port development to project connectivity projects. And all of these things are actually India-centric. They want to bypass India, they want to sideline India and India's connections with Iran. The third dimension here is that it's about the capital building exercise. Let's understand. The Chinese have been very, very careful about Afghanistan issue. They have not really been that that forthcoming when it comes to taking leadership role in Afghanistan. Of course, they have invested money. Of course, they have taken some initiatives in Afghanistan in terms of reconstruction of the Afghanistan. They have supported the Afghanistan peace process and all. But then the Chinese understand that only reaching to Afghanistan in Middle East is not going to help them to emerge as a bigger power. They need to really build relationship capital in Middle East. So apart from Afghanistan, they are investing a lot in Iran because Iran can be the real partner for them from where they can actually operate and influence the politics in Afghanistan. So Iran is a launching pad for China to operate for other greater Middle East regions. And this is how the Chinese are looking at Iran today. Thank you.
Okay. China seems to be focusing on all India's neighbors. We've seen how Nepal has amended its constitution on Limpiadura, Lipu Lake, and Kalapani issue, and how additional submarines have been given to Bangladesh. And I think almost 87% of Bangladeshi imports are duty-free into China today. And of course, the Rajapakshes have always been, pet for China. I mean, they just gave them a lot of doles and they asked them to do what they want with it. Rajapakshas are very much pro-China. So given this scenario around us, Pakistan being in their kitty, Nepal now is gone into their, sphere. Bangladesh, of course, they're still not completely in their thing, but still they're talking about it. Myanmar, of course, they're completely heavily dependent on Chinese trade. I think almost 80% of their business is only with China and Bangladesh. So given, Sri Lanka, given this kind of encircling around us, how do you think Bharat's response should be to this, action from Dragon?
So basically, we are talking about the neighborhood politics. And we are talking about China's outreach in the neighborhood. Now, one thing I have to mention here is that when you are talking about the emergence of China as a power, let's understand that it manages to emerge the way it has emerged today because of its neighborhood politics and neighborhood policies. From 2000 onwards, what we have seen is that China is focusing a lot on the neighborhood, be it in the Central Asia, be it in the South Asia, be it in the Himalayan Valley, be it in the Southeast Asia. They have given the utmost importance to the neighborhood. And therefore, today, what we are seeing is that they are dividing the relationship between India and its neighbors. For example, we did see that during the Doklam incident, their main target in the Doklam episode was to create a fissure between India and Bhutan, and they succeeded. Today, they are influencing the politics, the political forums, the political parties, the politicians within Nepal on the Kalapani issue to the Lipu Lake issues. And the whole approach is to create as much as possible the division, the differences between India and Nepal is concerned. If we see similarly, among the other Southeast Asian and East Asian countries, the Chinese would be gradually be doing that. They have already, on Pakistan, they don't need to do anything because it's an established fact. But we do see the same might happen with regard to Bangladesh, with regard to Sri Lanka at some point. In Maldives also, they were doing the same thing over the years. The Chinese were influencing the Maldives government against India for a long, long time.
Yeah, regime was.
Yeah, until the current government in Maldives came.
Mohammad Solih, yeah.
Yeah. So it has been a strategy in the neighborhood that not only to expand China's outreach, but also create the divisions between the most competing power to China and the other neighbors, that is here, that is actually India. The most competing power in China's neighborhood is India, and they want to create a fracture between India and the Southeast Asian and the Himalayan neighbors. But more than that, I think what the Chinese are actually figuring out is that as their foreign policy, their growth story talks about, that they have relatively managed to handle the neighbors nicely. And that has been their success point about their rise and economic growth. So consequently, they realize that if they can keep on struggling with India's neighbor, then India's growth story will not really move by. So that means, in other words, they want India to stay engaged with Nepal. They want India to stay engaged with Bhutan. They want India to stay engaged with Pakistan on different kind of political and conflictual issues. So that India will be more worried about managing the neighbors, including China, and India would not really be focusing on the larger foreign policy issues, be it geopolitical issues or international issues. And I think this is what the Chinese are currently doing, and they will continue to do that because that is their foreign policy strategies as far as India is concerned.
What should India do? How do we respond to them?
I think it's just going to be more and more challenging for India. We need to do three things. One, we should continue with our first neighborhood policy. Let's understand one thing, that when you are having such kind of a range of neighbors, problems are bound to happen and problems are going to arise. There is no running away from these problems. We have to live with the problems. But while saying that we are facing problems from Pakistan, we are facing problems from Nepal today, we need to also ask, are we not really handling it nicely? Yes, we are handling it nicely. And I think our response pattern has been very effective. The way we responded in the surgical strike in Myanmar, in the India-Myanmar border, the way we responded to Pakistan in the surgical strike, the way we have handled the relationship with Nepal, despite of the current government in Nepal, showing all the untying measures, and I think we have managed well. But so therefore, the first thing what we should do is that we should continue with our current policy to stay engaged with the neighbors. The second is, and I think we should employ a bigger coalition strategy in terms of building a coalition with the major economic powers in the world. For example, with Japan, with US, and try to influence the smaller countries in the Southeast Asia and in the Southeast Asian region. For example, if we talk about Maldives, in the last election, both India and US actually together played a significant role in terms of pulling out the regime, pulling out the new government, which would actually came as a surprise victory. So similarly, we need to have a cooperation between India and Japan to improve the economic situation in Bangladesh, improve the economic situation in Bhutan, in Nepal, so that we can keep these powers with in our side instead of allowing them to go to the Chinese side. As you know, the Japan is actually investing a lot in Northeast India. So we need to build a coalition strategy in terms of a third country, a 2+1 strategy. That means India, Japan, and Bhutan, India, Japan, and Nepal, India, Japan, and Bangladesh economic cooperation. India, US, Bangladesh, India, US, Bhutan, India, US, Nepal. We need to bring US to cooperate with the smaller countries. If we can do that, that will be one of the successful strategies. The third point, what we need to do is that we need to build capital. We need to build connectivity. And we need to build better networks of communications with these neighbors. You see, if we try to understand, it's like all those emerging economies will always have better ambitions. The lesser emerging economies, they will have bigger ambitions. So what we are seeing, all of the South Asian countries or the neighbors of India, be it Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan, they want to rise. So their rising ambitions, they would like to have India as the benchmark to rise. So therefore, they would like to see India as in a competing space, and we should be clear about it. Gradually, they will be moving away from India, and we should not be surprised about that. While doing that, we need to, realizing that we need to, improve our border infrastructure. We need to have proper road and railway communications and infrastructure connectivity with these countries, so that we keep the channel of communications with these countries, because we do know that these countries are actually heavily dependent on India when it comes to their trade and economic contacts. China is not going to provide them everything. Let's talk about Nepal. If today we stop the trading contacts with Nepal, Nepal's economy will go into deeper crisis, and China is not in a position to save Nepal. We need to make realize Nepal that. The same thing we need to make realize Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, other neighboring countries. Thank you.
I'll just ask two more questions and then we'll throw up on the panel. The question answer session. Why is India's response not strong enough? A lot of people say you have just banned 59 apps and 47 apps, and that's not a big deal. India has kept quiet as far as Hong Kong is concerned, for instance. As a democracy, India should have at least voiced its concern in terms of the democratic rights being taken away from the Hong Kong citizens. India has completely kept silent. Whereas US, Australia, and so many, Canada, and so many people have criticized it and taken action. Whereas India has neither taken action nor has it even spoken about it. In some UN body, some vague statement has been given, but otherwise no official statement from Ministry of External Affairs has come up. So why is it so? Second, when China doesn't regard one India policy, when they have been consistently doing this staple visas for Arunachalis, treating them as Chinese, or people from Jammu Kashmir. Past is past. We have sheepishly accepted, or we did nothing about it. But at least now, after the Galwan incident, why did we not challenge the one China policy? Why are we not at least courting Taiwan, and at least some, if not the Prime Minister, at least somebody could have wished His Holiness the Dalai Lama on his 85th birthday a week, 10 days back. Why is India still, being so nice to China?
Okay, let me first address the point on Hong Kong. I think on the Hong Kong issue, we allow China to have a free ride. There I agree. I think on the Hong Kong issue, we should have been a little more vocal, because there are huge number of Indian companies in Hong Kong, and we have a large establishments in Hong Kong as far as Indian people are concerned, business communities, and also given our traditional contacts with Hong Kong and the Greater China regions, particularly in the Hong Kong and Macau region. Now, what we should have done is that not only we have strongly objected, but when China was actually taking over Hong Kong, and when China was changing the policies, we should have objected to Hong Kong there. For example, uh, those who have actually traveled to Hong Kong, they will realize this point, is that I think roughly 5 years back when you used to travel to Hong Kong, in Hong Kong, Indian passport holders, we were not requiring any visa. We just show the passport and enter into to Hong Kong. That is no more the case. Today, we have to obtain a pre-registration, a pre-authorization form in order to enter in. So therefore, I think on Hong Kong issue, we should have objected when the Chinese changed their policy. There we have done a strategic mistake maybe 5-7 years back when Hong Kong's authorization form came up for the Indian citizens. Earlier, Indian citizens having a valid passport, they could travel for 14 days freely for Hong Kong. Today, we have to produce an authorization certificate. Pre-authorization certificate has to be issued so that we can travel. So that's a little, not in good taste, and we should have objected to it.
So when did this happen after the current Modi regime took over?
I think almost at the same time. It happened probably in 2013 and 14 when there was a transition in the government. I am unable to recall exactly in what government it happened, whether in the UPA government and the India government. But we lost the period and we lost the time to object to the Chinese government.
So I get a message said that somebody has Googled it. I think Subrato, our host, has Googled it. He says it happened in 2013.
13.
So it is Manmohan Singh. Yeah, okay.
116. Okay. Then the other issue is that, you see, where we have actually, of course, it's not a nice thing that what the Chinese have done, because visa has been a big issue for the Chinese for a long time. And Prime Minister Modi actually relaxed some of the visa norms for the Chinese. And we allowed some of the Chinese to apply for online visa to have a tourist visa. But look at the way the Chinese behaved us in the Galwan, in the Jumar incident, in the Duklam incident, and the way they have approached us on the Hong Kong issue. They have introduced this authorization later that the Indian people should have before traveling to Hong Kong. So I think the issue needs to be addressed properly, and we need to pass to the Chinese that if you want the India to stay engaged with India, you need to show the greater reciprocity towards the Indian people traveling to Hong Kong and Indian people traveling to China. If the Chinese, if your administration, if Xi Jinping administration wants that the Chinese people should come to India applying for an e-visa or online visa. And I think we should make this tit for tat kind of countering point to the Chinese, make it very clear to them so that they should not really take it for granted. The other issue is that I think the other issue I forgot. I think you had asked
one China versus one India policy.
One China, one. I think the former cabinet minister, late Sushma Swaraj had stated that if China wants India to appreciate the one China policy, then China should really reciprocate and acknowledge India, the one India policy. I think there the issue lies that can we really revisit the one China policy? Now I am going to write a paper about this, but again, let's understand one thing. There are two red line issues in China. Apart from the red lines that they talk about the national security issues in terms of land and maritime issues, There are red line issues. For example, on South China Sea, on Shikoku Island, on India-China boundary dispute, they have red line. But on thematic issues, the Chinese are also having red lines. For example, they are having issues about um, they are having issues about Dalai Lama issues. They are having issues about one China policy. These are two emotional and stronger issues in Chinese foreign policy. Now, on both these issues, can India revisit? Of course, Dalai Lama and the Tibet issue is a slightly different issue. Let's talk that issue slightly separately. But on the one China policy, it's a very, very complicated issue. We cannot simply just revisit and just say that we don't acknowledge or we don't appreciate the one China policy. Now, why we can't do that? We can't do that because for several reasons. One, we are not sure what Taiwan thinks about India-China boundary dispute. Is Taiwan and both the political parties in Taiwan, the DPP and the KMT, are they supporting India about the Arunachal Pradesh, about Taiwan, about India's claim in Oxygen? We need to really be sure about that. Because let's not forget, Taiwan was a part of China at some point. And India-China boundary dispute is a historical dispute. It's not really a contemporary dispute. So there are complicated issues attached to it. The second is that we need to be sure that if we are withdrawing from the one China policy, then are we really prepared to face the consequences? That means the Chinese will strike back hard, maybe on 2 or 3 levels. One, they would stop diplomatic contacts with India, or they might create a mini-scale war or a full-scale war with India, or they might really they might stop all the contacts with India and start creating problems with Pakistan on the boundaries. So can we really deal with so much complications? That is the second scenario we need to really sure about before talking about, de-acknowledging the one China. The third issue here is that are we really sure that if we withdraw our support and we do not really acknowledge the one China policy, are we really sure that other countries like the US and other countries, they will also do the same? If they are not in a position, let's see, despite of all the problems US is having with China right now, US has not withdrawn from one China policy. They still continue with the one China policy. So for the sake of having a problem with China, we cannot just withdraw from one China policy. Now, my next point comes, which is the next question. So these are the 3 scenarios we should be mindful about one China policy. But my next point and the next question is the most interesting one. At what circumstances we should withdraw and we should de-acknowledge the one China policy? We should not really acknowledge the one China policy. We should withdraw our support and we should not acknowledge about one China policy if China attacks India or China creates a dual front attack with Pakistan, with the cooperation of Pakistan against India. If China is doing that, then we are free to revisit our position on the South China Sea issue. We are free to revisit our issue on the one China policy and many other issues, including Oxygen. We should be openly claiming about our Oxygen and making headlines. And I think all of these extreme situations should encourage us to revisit our approach on one China policy. But at this moment, despite of all the tensions and problems happening, this is not the right time to revisit the one China policy. Thank you.
Okay. I think I'll ask my last question and then I'll throw it open. This is a question which has been going on for the last 20, 30 years at least, would China break up at some point in time? We have the example of Soviet Union breaking up. Of course, China is probably not as economically weak as Soviet Union then was. But then after this Chinese Wuhan coronavirus pandemic, uh, their economy is not doing great. And even before that, the BRI was itself trying to shift their unemployment to other countries. So BRI is failing in many countries. And so assuming even BRI goes through after 10, 15 years, all these labor is going to come back to China. And so how are they going to manage it? They still have 20, 25 cities, ghost cities, as they say. Nobody there, infrastructure is built. So they kept on giving employment to people, and there is an end to it. That model is not sustainable. So at some point in time, they have to handle loss of jobs, loss of economy, and all that stuff. So put and plus added to that the American pressure in Cold War, whatever they are going to do. I think they already passed resolution on Xinjiang. They passed a resolution on Tibet, and we don't know what's going to happen in future. How do you read it? Do you think maybe in the medium term to a little long term, you see China breaking up into whatever, maybe some parts of it becoming independent and China crunching into the Middle Kingdom? How do you see that?
I think one thing we need to be clear about that um, China will not really fall down like the Soviet Union. And there are strong reasons why China will not fall down. China will not fall down because Chinese economy is too strongly linked with the global economy. If we try to recollect the 2008 economic and financial crisis, the Chinese came into the rescue of the world economy. Today, the Chinese economy is much, much closely linked with the world economy in a higher scale. So that would not really allow the Chinese economy to fall down. Second, if we talk about the interdependence between the global economy and the Chinese economy, let's be mindful about one thing. Out of the top 100 banks across the world, almost 18 or 19 banks are there whose head office are either in Beijing or in Shanghai. So let's be realizing one fact that despite of all of these pandemics, no banks have closed their office as of yet in China. Nobody has withdrawn from China. And nobody is going to withdraw from China because, like India, it's a populist society. It's a populist country. Money is linked in the Chinese society. It's a resourceful country. So all the international banks would like to have their offices in big cities of China. So that would not really allow the Chinese economy or China to fall down. The third is, most of the global institutions and the educational institutions, not so much about Indian institutions and Indian educational systems, but if we talk about the US economic system, US education system, Australian education system, Australian economic system, Japan's education system and Japan's economic system are closely linked with the Chinese economy and China's education system. None of these countries are going to withdraw from China completely. There might be withdrawal in some select areas, but they are not going to withdraw. So the fall of China would never happen. But what we might see is the fall of the Communist Party of China. Now, the Communist Party of China will struggle. Now, when I'm saying the fall of the Communist Party of China, it is not going to happen in the similar fashion like the way Soviet Union collapse happened. I think Communist Party of China today are having many subsets of the Communist Party of China. There are 7 or 8 small groupings. They are the backups parties. They try to build membership support for the Communist Party of China. They are actually, most of them are actually agencies for the Communist Party of China. They are closely linked with the power politics within the China. Within Communist Party, there are many sects and folds. So some of these smaller parties within China, they are linked with some of these factional groups. So what we need to take a note of the fact that there might be a fall of the Communist Party of China at some point if the Chinese economy is slowing down or going into a severe crisis. If unemployment is rising, if the economy is in crisis, if the governance issues are deteriorating, then the Communist Party will be on the spotlight and there might be a fall of Chinese Communist Party and we should be mindful about it. But the fall of the Chinese Communist Party would not necessarily mean the fall of China, primarily because, as I mentioned, there are additional certain small sectoral groups are there who would come as a coalitions and might build as a some kind of compromised party to take care of the China's governance process. So China would continue as a power. There might not really be fall of China like the fall of Soviet Union, but there is a chance of the fall of the Communist Party if the economy is going to continue struggle in China. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I think let's start taking questions. Mohandas ji, please go ahead, sir.
Can I ask one?
Yeah. Please go ahead, sir.
No, from 2000 to 2019, our imports from China has gone up by 45 times. It was around 10 crores rupees or so at that time. It has gone up to something like $80 billion now. So even if we stop it altogether as a reaction, Chinese are going to be affected to the tune of only 2.7% of their exports. So that is not going to make a big change as far as China is concerned. So you have to be very careful. And as Girdharji said, many of the supply chains are going to be affected. So we have to be a little careful in planning it. Number one. Another thing is, how are we going to deal with this situation? The Invest India has identified 800, the Chinese presence or Chinese shareholding in 800 Indian companies. They say there might be more. And recently they have identified 18 of India's unicorns, including Big Bazaar, Byju's, Flipkart, Make My Trip, Ola, Oyo, Paytm, then Snapdeal, Swiggy. All these are now being controlled, not totally owned by them, but they have substantial investment in all this. Of course, the government of India has very recently changed the automatic route looking after this, but already they have percolated to a very large extent, and we are unable to know to what extent the Chinese presence is there in Indian industry. This is one problem. How are we going to deal with this? Number two, a lot of infrastructure in India, especially national highways, etc., they are being funded by Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, in which Chinese have almost 30% shareholding. India has something like 8% or 9%. So that also may be likely to be affected. So how are we going to say resolve some of these basic issues? Because the border dispute, etc., are much less when compared to some of these highly dangerous invasion of Chinese investment into 800 or more Indian companies. How do we tackle it?
Very interesting point. Thank you, Mohandas ji. Let me combine both the questions together. Here, the whole point is that how we are going to dealing from China when China is so closely ingrained within our society, within our economy. How we are going to dealing from China. That's the essence of your questions. The facts and figures I'm not really going to repeat because you have rightly pointed out. So I'm not going to touch upon the facts and figures. But yes, I think we have taken a temporarily but principled position at this moment. In fact, as you recall, the Honorable Road and Transport Minister has said that we are going to review all those projects where the Chinese investment is concerned, is there, or the Chinese are linked in some ways as in the joint ventures. And that says it all. That I think all of this dealing will take some time.
Yes.
It's not really going to happen in a single day or a single month. It is going to be a gradual phenomenon. And as I could see is that this distance will only grow and this de-link will only grow in times to come. But while doing that, we should not really misjudge the politics here. Let's understand one thing, that the politics US is playing, the politics Japan is playing, the politics Australia is playing, they are playing this politics against China on a different platform. Because some of them are really developed economies. India is not. The forte of India lies in the consultative economic operations, consultative frameworks of engagement. So to what extent we could de-link is really a debatable question. We need to identify sectors. I cannot go by sector, but we need to identify sectors in order to de-link or in order to engage in China, with China. So there should be sectors where we should decide to engage with China. There should be sectors where we need to decide to withdraw from China. For example, on the road connectivity infrastructure transport projects, we need to have 50-50. It's not really, in my personal opinion, it's not really a wise decision not to allow the Chinese companies to come and construct the road. Because that's what we could ask the Chinese to do, because they are very good in building road infrastructure. But when it comes to the telecom industries, when it comes to softwares, when it comes to hardwares, when it comes to other industrial sector, we might engage with Japan, we might engage with South Korea, we might engage with so many other countries. So the whole approach to de-link or link with China should be on sector to sector basis. It should be issue-centric basis. It cannot be a comprehensive de-link or link approach. We need to take each and every issue on its own merit to talk about China engagement or disengagement. So one more point I would like to also point out, which from where I actually started. If we try to think about US-China and Japan-China engagement and Australia-China engagement, look at the Australian Foreign Minister. What Australian Foreign Minister has said just yesterday or day before yesterday, after their successful meeting with the US counterpart, they have said that a complete countering strategy against China is not possible on Australia's. So while we are building our capacity, while we are building our relationship networks with US, Australia, Japan, in order to corner China, we should not be doing something foolish where we would be really spoiling our day-to-day life on day-to-day life with the Chinese, because after all, geography cannot change and China is an immediate neighbor. So there has to be a pragmatic policy. So pragmatism and issue-based pragmatism should be the hallmarks of India's China policy at this moment. The link, the de-link, the engagement, the de-engagement should follow from there. Thank you.
You have to live with the corona. You have to live with the virus.
I mean, the whole world is living with the virus. I mean, there the Chinese should be punished.
Thank you, Mohandas. Thank you. Next, Indira ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
So it's a very detailed lecture. I came to know many things. My question is, China is now in standoff with us in the border. I mean, China in 1962, it was not an economic giant. And it was on par with us or below us in GDP also. But yet it confronted. that means it has expansionist designs, and they take 2 steps forward and 1 step backward so that they can gain 1 step in the borders. That is their policy. And I would like to know from you the palm and 5 fingers, what they said. Palm is the Askai Chin, and 5 fingers are Ladakh, Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Gilgit-Baltistan and Nepal. And they want to have the whole thing. That is their plan. So we must be prepared for that. For that, India need to become an economic supergiant very soon. How China is able to have all the other our neighboring countries is because it is investing in them, and they are become clientele, and they are become surrogates of China. And even if we befriend them on some terms or the other, they'll take back. As you said, in Maldives, we Modi ji announced so much of money for them. He gave them. So that is how we could bring them to our fold. So my thing is, what I would like to see is, India has to have 10% GDP. That is the best foreign policy. Usually journalists and writers write. Do you agree with that? And about Iran, Iran directly fell in the lap of China and Russia because of US sanctions. US pushed them to wall. So they went there, and that is going against us, because China is in a way putting a knot around us. The other thing is, we are befriending with US, and again US friends UAE and Saudi Arabia. So that is one more point that goes against our friendship with China. So what I think is, India should grow fast and become an economic giant. Otherwise, these troubles will remain. Do you agree?
First is about the 5 fingers that Mao had talked about. I think in India, there is an overemphasis on this aspect. You are right that Mao has talked about all these 5 points in the 5 fingers in his speech. So there is the Chinese ambition attached to the neighborhood regions. But try to understand in today's context, if we try to understand, China's ambition is much bigger. What the 5 fingers strategy is talking about is basically talking about the territorial issues. It's not really talking about the geopolitical ambitions. The geopolitical ambition of China is much massive. They want to emerge in Asia as the only dominant power. Now, at what cost? At India's cost, because they know that only India could rise to this extent. They want to emerge as the #1 country in the world. At what cost? India and the US cost. Not allowing India to become a member of the permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, and also trying to defeat US in terms of economic development. So China's geopolitical ambitions is much bigger. So what Howard said is one thing that is basically linked with the territorial ambitions or the land aspect of the ambitions. But if we talk about the Chinese ambition, it's much bigger than that. In fact, another 5 fingers will be very less about that. There will be so many fingers that would be explaining the Chinese ambitions. So India needs to really look at those emerging Chinese challenges, Chinese ambitions, which are much, much bigger than what Mao had said. The other is about the Iran issue. Yes, you are right that because of the US factor, the Chinese are taking Iran much, much more seriously. But as I mentioned, I think the Chinese are very good in managing the regions. The management of geographical sub-regions is one of those hallmarks in Chinese foreign policy. If you see, traditionally, they did emphasize a lot on Central Asia and Northeast Asia. Today, the Chinese are emphasizing a lot on Southeast Asia on South Asia, and on Middle East. And that's for a deliberate reason, because they cannot come directly to the Indian Ocean regions. So Iran factor is also very closely linked with the broader Chinese foreign policy strategy. Thank you.
Kannanji, please go ahead. Sorry. Kannanji, I have unmuted you. Yeah.
Hello, namaskar. Thank you so much, Jagannath. Very, very good lecture. I mean, I have a very, very specific questions. My journey is personally with China since 1998 in Delhi. And I couldn't do much in the Chinese business. Then I had to move to UK and the US on the many development front. And close relationship in China since 2009 with our so-called client Huawei and many more dealings. There are a few things I wanted to share with you. Number one, I'm still having my business in China, Shenzhen, and also in Hong Kong. The insiders inside China, their only worry is India. They're not scared of anybody in the world. Every business people in China, they know that. And also, yes, we know a long list of issues between two countries, and we are neighbors, strangers. I think in your book also you covered very much in the India-China relations in 2016. The book you mentioned in the multi-order, right? It's a new multi-order. It's quite interesting to see the one with the Iran thing. I don't want to go in geopolitical aspect, but today my question is very specific. Just to confirm, I mean, I'm from the telecom and the organic farming industry, not anything beyond that, only those two. What do you think? I mean, do we have, from our Indian nationalist point of view, obviously, Pragna is a best platform. From the business policy perspective, how do we need to get ready? There was some kind of forum regularly to closely work with the geopolitics and understanding of the policy, and also do the best thing for India. For example, things like MSDM now, hardware manufacturing, which was systematically weaned by our previous government. There are proof for that, but too late to talk about that now. Now we can do that, and we are the only potential country in the world can do that. Of course, we are working on that in many levels, but the constructive action should be combined with the policy and investments. Of course, investment is not a really big problem, but the issues around the how we really working together to build that kind of platforms to tackle for our own self-reliance model. That's one big question. So basically, I wanted to know, do we have any serious business forums to specifically understand Chinese things? That's what I wanted to ask you.
One is about what should be India's strategy. I think we need to have a self-oriented developmental program. The government has already talked about Make in India, Skill India, Digital India. All of these sectors need revamping and a little promotion. But we need to also think about new forums, new schemes. We need to come out with a new strategy, new plans. Each of the sectors need a new revamping strategy. And if we do that, then we will be in a position to improve our governance model. This is how the Chinese have done over the last 2 decades or 3 decades. There are serious lessons to learn from the Chinese. We might really dislike them. We might really question them for their behavior, but the way they have progressed, we need to learn from them at some ways. So that would be my answer, that each of the sectors in India need special emphasis so that we can improve as a power. While doing that, I think your second point was about any forums that talks about China and all. I think in India, we need to have a greater all India China framework or a forum platform where we need to have a debate, maybe a national conclave on China for 5 days or 10 days, where we need to have in-depth discussion about each and every issue of China. be it Communist Party of China, be it Chinese politics, economics, society, Chinese culture, Chinese history. We need to really understand about China and China's every aspect in details. And I think we need a national consciousness platform against our enemy countries, including China. And that needs to be really built up. And I don't really see that is happening in India. And I think we need to really take a serious step to do that. As I mentioned about China in my talk at the beginning of my talk, that if we remember 2003, my first visit to China was in 2004 and 5. That time, a handful of institutes and think tanks in China were studying about India. Today, when I visit China, I do see that every other institute in China are studying about India and South Asia.
Yes.
But that is not the case in India. Why we are not studying about China? The more we study them, the more we are, will get familiarized and acclimatized about their growth story, about their planning, about their strategy, about their military outlook. We are not doing that. In fact, in India, we don't have any institutions which is exclusively studying about Chinese military issues, Chinese economic issues. We don't have institutions studying about China exclusively. We have a smaller institution called the Institute of Chinese Studies. They seriously lack research and scholarships. They have some good scholars who are actually former practitioners, diplomats, and they are from former universities, or some of them are serving teachers currently. But we don't have really good budding emerging scholars coming up. And we need many more institutions like Institute of Chinese Studies across India, which could actually match to our potential. So we need greater platform to talk about China and to discuss about each and every specific issues dealing with China, be it politics, society, culture, military, and we need serious deliberation about China. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Kannanji.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Sandeep ji, please go ahead. Sandeep Empathy.
Namaskar, Jagannath ji. I'm Sandeep here. Hello?
Yes, namaskar. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. So I want to understand, we have declared, the Prime Minister Modi has declared the Atmanirbhar Bharat package so as to make sure India is self-reliant, and we have the goal of this $5 trillion economy amidst this crisis. Right? What do you think should be the additional response of the Indian government with respect to assume this global supergiant in terms of economic sense? That's first thing. The second question that I have is, I know you just said that China is going to create problems for us to assume the position in the UNSC, but is that the end of the road for us in terms of assuming position in UNSC, or do we have a strategy in place, or are we going to formulate something in this direction so that we have a reformulation of UNSC and then we also have a position in UNSC?
I'll like to answer your UNSC question first. Is that, you see, the way UNSC is currently structured, we cannot expect anything. It will never happen. So what is the solution? Shall we just keep on waiting, staying outside, and visualizing that one day we'll be a permanent member? That will never happen. We need to change our strategy. We need to have a serious dialogue with the US, with other countries, to abandon or dismiss the. I think that's the only radical step we can do. Maybe not now, but maybe after 5 years. But before that, we need to prepare a ground, serious ground, to talk about how to address the situation, whether to disband permanently United Nations. You look at the US, the way they have disbanded WHO, World Health Organization. They have stopped funding WHO. So US is capable of withdrawing from US. Can we really afford to do that? We need to really think about that. We need to really talk with the US, Japan, and many other countries across the world to build that kind of consensus. So at some point, we need to really take a tough call about United Nations Security Council and UN. The way UN is functioning at this moment, I don't think it's really functioning properly. So therefore, we can't just keep on waiting to become one day permanent member. And also we need to realize that holding a permanent membership in UN is not really going to be helpful to India. Because the politics is such that no matter how much you try to have a policy and how much you try to make an inroad into the United Nations Security Council, power using veto, you cannot do much. So there are structural limitations in the UN and United Nations Security Council. We need to really reassess those situations, and at some point probably to build a consensus either to reform the United Nations or to disband and withdraw completely from United Nations, along with a range of other countries, maybe majority of the countries across the world. If India can take the leadership with the US, with Japan, then we can build a favorable ground for us. But at this point, I don't really see anything happening as far as our permanent membership is concerned. If we continue to employ and a campaigning for permanent membership in the UNSC, that will never happen. Thank you.
What about this first question, Jagannath-ji? The economic response of the government.
Can you just repeat it? I just missed your question because you...
Sure. So we have this, the Atmanirbhar Bharat package announced amidst this crisis by Honorable Prime Minister, right? This is the aim and the objective is to make sure India is self-reliant, and also that we have the target of reaching that $5 trillion economy, right? So that is amidst that crisis and amidst the targets that we have set for ourselves. But do we also have, do you think that we need to have a different response, economic response, not just the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, but something else? Or I'm not very sure. Do you have a view on this?
You see, Atmanirbhar Bharat is a very good initiative by the Prime Minister. In fact, I have written an article in the Asia Times. You can read about it. In fact, I have said that Atmanirbhar Bharat has foreign policy dimensions. It explains not only Prime Minister's vision plan, but also the country's vision plan, the way it should move. And it is something interesting that we need to be self-reliant on every sector. But more than that, I think what we need to really talk about is that Atmanirbhar Bharat is nothing actually unusual. It is bound to happen at some stage, and we need to really prepare for that. It's not really going to happen the way we are talking about the Prime Minister is talking. Each and every people in this country, every citizen in this country has to really involve themselves to make India become Atmanirbhar, to make India become self-reliant. How do we become self-reliant? And to become self-reliant, it's not really an easy practice. There has to be some sacrifices. China has done that. In fact, today, if we talk about China, how did it achieve so much economic development? How come its economy really reached at this level? How come its industrial defense industry is actually risen to this? Because they believed in indigenization program in each and every sector, be it agriculture, be it industry, be it science and technology, be it defense manufacturing. They did a homegrown research, they established institutions, they nurtured it, they invested on it, they allowed Chinese people to take part in playing active role into it. So therefore, if we are really going to nurture the Atmanirbhar Bharat, we need to build capability, we need to build capacity, and we need to also have a range of tools where citizenship participation will be the most effective way of dealing with this rising trend of Atmanirbhar Bharat. If we can't really involve citizens, come and join and contribute to it, then there is nothing called Atmanirbhar. So we need to bring out a social awareness campaign among the institute, among the universities, among the students, among the teachers, among the knowledge communities, among the industrial and the business communities that this is a chain we are talking about. When we are talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, that means we are talking about an indigenization chain within the country, within a whole lot of sectors. Each of these sectors are interlinked with each other. And therefore, we need to create that rejuvenation among our domestic output and input so that the chain, the recirculation of the domestic growth rate continues and we stay alive as a power and we contribute and develop as a country and as a power independently. And that will actually give boost and strength to our foreign policy. This is what Atmanirbhar Bharat is all about. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe if I may just add something to what Panda ji said. See, the point is, I think US, I mean, a couple of years back I checked up, US was producing at an average about 50,000 original patents per annum. Japan was producing something like about 25,000 patents per annum. And China was producing about 12 to 14,000 patents per annum. And India was producing 1,400 patents. So we do not have that culture in us to produce patents. Even the biggest industrialist and the biggest richest man in India goes and sells vegetables and FMCG products. He doesn't invest in research. So everybody looks for quick money in this country. Nobody is investing in research. So that is the problem. I think, is it because of the governmental policy? They don't want anybody to do research in the private, or we are just happy just to be traders. We don't want to be innovators. I don't know. There's some major issue that seems to be the bottleneck. That is what is stopping us from Atmanirbhar. This is my take on that, Pandaji. Yeah, I think next we'll take Poonamji. Poonamji, please go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know if I can see you. Namaskar, sir. The first thing that I want to ask is like, do we see, sorry for all that has been happening around the world because of the pandemic. The first question, which I have a doubt as a layman, is was this COVID-19 a suicidal approach by China? Were they really intending to have a biological war? Was it intentional or it was not? The COVID-19 pandemic, I'm talking about the COVID-19 thing. Can you understand? Hello?
I'm unable.
You can't hear me.
Yeah, I can't hear you properly. Can you please?
Hello?
Yeah.
So she's saying, let me put it. She's saying, is China responsible for this pandemic? Did they use a biological war? Are they to be blamed for? Is this just an accident or something intentionally done by China?
Okay. Thank you, Poonamji.
But Poonamji, this is something which we have been very consistent. And let him answer.
Yeah,
second. In Pragna Bharati, we have been very consistent. We never call that COVID. We call it Chinese Wuhan coronavirus. We are very clear about it. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Pandaji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yes.
You answer a question and then we'll go to the second. Yeah.
Thank you, Poonamji, for the questions. I mean, my take here is that, you see, one way of saying that, yes, there is no denying of the truth. There is no denying of the fact that the virus has its own origin from China, and China should be held responsible for that. China should own this fault, and China should acknowledge that it is a Chinese origin virus. So there is no doubt about it. But I think addressing your point that what kind of theories attached to it, whether it is genuinely a Chinese-made virus, to what extent the Chinese have made it. My point here is, my intention here is, because after the virus has actually spread out throughout the world, we have not really seen any team visiting China and doing an inspection, even though there is a demand growing across the world that China should agree for a neutral investigations, and the WHO should come and investigate, international teams should come and investigate what happened from where the virus has actually arrived. So unless a proper investigation comes up and happens, we cannot really reach to a conclusion. But my take here would be that there is definitely a Chinese angle attached to it. While the Chinese may not have done it intentionally, but there is some or there is some chemistry attached to it where the Chinese were engaged in doing a limited warfare with certain countries, perhaps with regard to US, if not with regard to India, with any other country, maybe perhaps with regard to the US or to certain countries where they were targeting certain countries or certain people, but that went out of their hand. Now, let me explain this part a little bit. If we see the way the COVID-19 virus started, the Chinese, they were unable to understand what to do initially. Of course, there was like, they did neglect facing the Dr. Lee's warning, and there has been heavier criticism about Xi Jinping on that. But then, if you see, the Chinese were also clueless how to address the situation. So what they did is that they employed a very drastic preventive measure, locked down the entire China, locked down one province from the other, so that the people transmission, the virus transmission cannot really happen. So that means the Chinese were also not sure about how to handle the virus and how to deal with the virus in future. So it implies that the Chinese were experimenting something radical. They were experimenting some biological virus, but it went out of their hand. They were not really prepared to handle it. So while it is a Chinese origin virus, there is some Chinese chemistry and mind, some conspiracy theories attached to it, but it might not really have been an intentional Chinese way of doing the way the virus has really come. China would never like the virus spreading out throughout the world, primarily because they know that they are going to be suffered. They are a populous country. There are a huge number of Chinese people staying outside China. So, and China is also equally strongly linked with the rest of the world. So they would not really like to do that. While saying that, I think the limited conspiracy theory is very much a practicable suggestion, which is, I mean, practical thing which is emerging. That means the Chinese were doing some experimentation in their library, and all of this thing went out of their hand. So they were unable to manage and control. And therefore we saw that they were not in a very prepared state to handle the virus. Even they don't have a virus vaccine today within China to tackle the virus. That explains they were not doing it intentionally against the whole world. Maybe they were trying to do it to a particular country or to a particular section of society at some point, which went out of their hand. Thank you.
Yeah. You're going to ask the second one? Yeah.
Yes. I have three questions. This is the second one. Besides the pandemic situation and all the bilateral relationships that we've been talking about, and I have been learning a lot through the past of why should we actually build relationships, and the economical relationships are different than the other political relationships and all that. Keeping everything aside of the past, what I feel, what I feel that this has created an opportunity for India to create employment here, because I'm sure after this pandemic, the whole world will look at India because of the labor structure that we have here, because of the population structure that we have here. So do you somewhere see in India, post-pandemic to have opportunities to explore? We have been talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat and everything. But you know what? All the countries require cheap labor. All the countries require people's effort to do their work and all that. So will the other countries start looking at India right now? Because there are a lot of companies which are going to come in India. I've heard that the iPhone 11 is going to be manufactured in the southern part of India. So do you also see this pandemic situation as an opportunity for growth in India in a certain way?
Every crisis comes with an opportunity, and therefore I will agree with you that yes, this is an opportunity time for India. But what kind of opportunities? And how should we take the advantage of this situation? I think these are the two big questions. But about the opportunities, it doesn't have, I mean, it's just not one situation. The pandemic is one, but the situation is a complex situation. So we have to find out what are the situations we are really talking about. We are talking about economic opportunities. We are talking about political opportunities. We are talking about security opportunities. We are talking about domestic growth, employment. So it has to be on sectoral basis. Pandemic has created a situation, but within that situation, there are multiple situations have arisen. So we have to take each of these situations on its own merit and demand. Second is, I think it's a given. Pre-pandemic, we were relatively in a better state of situation, even though the economy was slightly struggling. But then rising economies, they always have these rise and fall trends in their economy. So I would not really read too much into the pre-economic crisis in India, pre-pandemic economic crisis in India. What I would suggest is that now the pandemic has arrived and we are going for a recession, and how to recover from this recession. Now, there are many ways of recovering from the recession. As you pointed out, that in a country like India, it should not be difficult to generate employment, generate growth pattern. There are areas and sectors we have not actually capitalized on. For example, let's take the example from China. 1978-79, Deng Xiaoping introduced the four modernization strategy. And this four modernization strategy was based on four specific sectors: agriculture, industry, science and technology, and people. And they did really focus on each of these sectors for the next one decade. India may not be able to do the same, but we need to really emphasize our priorities on certain sectors. For example, agricultural sector is not in good state. And I think there has to be some national consciousness strategy to revitalize the agricultural sector. Make the agricultural sector like an attractive sector where knowledge communities, where business communities, they can go and even do some farm. And I think that should be encouraged. Let's talk about the industrial sectors. Small scale industries, heavy scale industries. Each of the, and medium sized industry. Each of these industrial sectors need not only revamp, re-strategy, but also greater people's participation. What so far we have done is that we have tried to empower the people or the youth. What Prime Minister Modi has done a tremendous job in last 5 to 7 years is that he has reoriented the youth to become self-disciplined and reoriented the youth to believe in themselves in making India strategy. So what in the process we have seen is that a lot of new initiatives, startups, programs has come up. That is just one area. Each of the business sectors communities needs a greater citizenship participation. The knowledge communities has to be linked. That means business sectors has to be linked with the knowledge communities, and the knowledge communities needs to come and do an effective participation in terms of small scale industries, medium scale industries, to do some kind of farming. So we need to establish that chain networks within our domestic platforms, within India, instead of trying to look outside India for collaboration and cooperation all the time. Third is that while we are trying to revamp our domestic sector, be it in the agricultural sector or in the industrial sector, or trying to establish the chain of networks between agricultural industry and the education system, the most important thing here is to encourage the foreign countries to come and invest here, give them enough space and take advantage of the process. And there we need to have a very concrete plan which will be linked with the new supply chain networks. We need to invite countries like Japan, Vietnam, South Korea to come in a big way and invest in India. Australia, they need to come here in a big way and invest. Japan is doing very well, but we need to invite other countries to come and invest, and we need to engage with them and give them enough space. South Korea is a great country, great economy. It's a rising economy, figures under top 15 GDP ranked economy. They need to be integrated into the Indian economic system much more, closely. We need to invite them. We don't have a good experience with them. POSCO came, but POSCO struggled, and then they have a very bad experience in India. We need to change that narrative quickly. This is the time to change that narrative, and that is a country where India could really engage with. So we need to actually take advantage of this process and stay engaged with the rest of the world while moving away from China. So it requires both domestic participation and international participation. It doesn't have to be one concrete action plan. It has to be a multi-pronged concrete action plan, because the pandemic has left us in one situation, but the issues are multiple. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is the very last question that I have, sir, because this has been, I was just going through internet, and I surf and I kind of learn. So the ex-foreign minister of Pakistan had to say something about India. This is not really China, but I will ask you why. I will tell you why am I asking this. So I want you to hear this. I'm just playing it. Let me know if you can.
The shift in India is irretrievably dangerous. What it means is that it's not short-term dangerous, medium-term dangerous. It is going to create a whole dynamic which we will not be able to reverse. You may know that Pakistan, together with India and all of South Asia, happens to be one of the least integrated areas in all of the world. The African Union does better than SAARC, which is the South Asian regional cooperation.
International trade in the region, for example.
In terms of regional integration, trade within the region, etc., etc. Now, when you take that forward,
so now these.
What does he say? I mean, let's be. I think it's. What exactly is he trying to imply?
No, it is only trying to imply that India is. Obviously, Pakistani people will always say that India is dangerous and it's not going to. It's not having the right kind of bilateral relationship with the neighboring countries. And there is a link which I will send it to you, Sir Giridhar sir, on WhatsApp. So somewhere, even in the WhatsApp messages of the current opposition which we have, they've always been saying that we are projecting that we really have very good relationship with the neighborhood, but we really do not have great bilateral relationships. Secondly, the relationship between in China and Pakistan. Will it not affect India somewhere or the other? I mean, will it affect India? Will it kind of create a nuisance in the fights that we are having in Pakistan? Because Pakistan is hand in hand with China. Will it somewhere have the border issues?
We cannot change geography, and we cannot stop two sovereign countries to cooperate. This cooperation is based on India. So China-Pakistan relationship will continue to flourish, and we should be mindful about that. But while saying that, I think what we should be prepared for are three eventualities. One, a China-Pakistan dual front attack on India, as I mentioned in my talk, we should be really mindful about that. But more than that, I think what really bothers me is that the kind of narrative is emerging not only between China and Pakistan, but also China, Pakistan, Russia.
China, Pakistan?
Russia.
Okay.
Russia. Okay.
China, Pakistan, Russia is a triangular relationship which is coming up. We should not, at no cost, we should not allow Russia to move away from us. It's a key partner. We purchase whole amount of majority of our defense equipments from Russia. We should continue with that. We should stay engaged with Russia. We should not allow Russia to go with the Pakistan and China at any cost. These are the initial years where Russia is showing tendencies to stay engaged with Pakistan and China. And I think we can play a significant role in terms of influencing Russia not to go with the Chinese and Pakistanis way. The third point here is that I think the broader narrative that both Pakistan and China are trying to build in terms of quadrilateral formulations. If you see, the Chinese are doing the same what India is doing with US, Japan, Australia. The Chinese are actually building a quadrilateral on their own. They are establishing a quadrilateral with Pakistan, Russia, and Iran. So we should be mindful about that. Not only we need to really stay connected with Russia, but also we need to really stay connected with Iran. Not to encourage Iran to go completely with the Chinese way. So our foreign policy has to be much more diversified, much more effective. So we should not really concretize our views about China-Pakistan bilateral relationship. This relationship will continue to exist. And nothing official about this relationship. But this relationship, if it flourishes beyond the bilateral perspective, then it is going to be much more dangerous for us. And I think we should be acting very fast, not to allow this China-Pakistan bilateral to gain grounds, to turn into a trilateral or quadrilateral format of relationships. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. See, a couple of points, Pandaji. One, I think what you rightly said about UN. UN is, I think, UN is dead. Long live UN. You know, it's just going through its pangs of death. I mean, it's just doing nothing. I mean, it's as good as dead. So many regional groupings have come, different G4, G10, G7, God knows how many numbers. You know, SARC, so many things have come up, BRICS. But then UN per se is more or less dead. I think we should ignore that. You know, I think you really hit the nail on the head. I think in some point in time, the world needs to realize that UN has failed and they need to come up with something else. But India, I think, should give up this dream of looking at UNSC seats and focus on its groupings, you know, it's whatever regional or otherwise we're going to quad or whatever. I mean, so many treaties and, friendships that we're going to have. That is, I think, going to be very crucial. I think what you said is perfectly right. Yeah. Abhinandan Reddy ji.
Sir, my question is actually, it said that China has a 21st century economy and a 19th century laws. In spite of its people getting richer, how is it able to keep its people happy? Because whenever, all over the world, when people get rich, they question, they want more rights. How is China able to keep its people under control?
I think it's manipulation. That has been the strategy of the Communist Party. They have not really kept people happy. They have manipulated to keep people happy. In fact, if you see the strategy of the Communist Party, they have offered limited space when it comes to the democratic rights of the Chinese people. They have offered limited freedoms, but at the same time, they have offered more economic rights, more economic prosperities, more economic values. So the Chinese Communist Party has created avenues for the Chinese people to gain financial benefits, to get richer, so that they will feel empowered. And if you see the Chinese people, they have traveled more than any other countries than the normal Indian people have traveled in foreign countries.
And they're studying outside also.
Yes. So
in many universities.
So it's a manipulator, and that is how the Chinese Communist Party has encased on the people's trust, and it is manipulating on the governance process and surviving. In fact, if you try to see the kind of Soviet jars used to be associated with USSR, the same kind of communist jars are there with the Communist Party of China. So therefore, when I said that there is a chance that the Communist Party of China might struggle and might fall down, that means there is a nexus not really staying intact among the jars within the Communist Party of China. There might be a power struggle, and eventually it might be the fall of the Communist Party of China. And that's how the party might struggle and the country might stop.
Sir, there's another question. Yes, sir. Yeah, it is the future would it's probable that there will be a democratic nations will be one bloc led by the US and the other autocratic nations led by China. So do you see two reserve currencies at play? Do you see two trading blocks coming in? Do you see the world being divided in between two groups sometime in the future?
It depends how we are looking at it. Already the world is divided between US and China, even though many countries would like to pretend that they are not really taking a side, but they are actually divided. As we take the example of Pakistan, Iran, they are with China. If we talk about India, Australia, Japan, they are with the US. So the world is increasingly divided. There are countries who would like to take a position. But while saying that, we should not really try to divide the world in black and white, because no matter how powerful US and China would be, we would be living in a multi-centric world. And this multi-centric world will have many parallels. It will have multipolar, multi-structured, multilateral institutions coming up, new multilateral venues coming up. So there will be many formulation of power. It won't be really necessarily be divided between US and China. US and China are two leading powers. Many powers will be around those two powers, but they not necessarily be holding each and every forum.
And even the relationship will be fluid, I guess. It'll keep changing.
It will keep on changing, and there will be also forums. And also, I would like to make this point at the clear at the end of my talk. This is my last point, is that I think what we are forgetting is that right now we are transitioning through a very, very crisis-prone period. The whole world is going through a crisis-prone period. That is the COVID-19 pandemic period. But once the pandemic actually goes down, let's wait for a year or two. Once the situation comes to a normal, we should not be completely ruling out China coming back as a greater power. So we should be mindful about China returning back in a much better fashion as a much powerful and stronger nation. We should be really careful about that. And many other countries would be supporting China because it will emerge much more powerful. Many India's neighbor countries might go with China, thinking that China would be more powerful. So let's not dismiss that kind of scenario. What we are currently living with is a temporary period. This period might continue a little longer, maybe a year, 2, or maybe 3 years, but it will eventually come down. The world will find a solution to the COVID-19, and China will come back. China is not going to fall down. We should be very mindful about that. So therefore, there will be many formulations. We might have to come back to our original formulation of staying engaged with China again. We should not be ruling out that kind of scenario. But while saying that, we should build our national strength in terms of military, in terms of economy, in terms of national capacity building in each and every sector. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Abhinandanji.
Yes, thank you,
See, Atma, we spoke so much about Atmanirbhar Bharat and all. And then after the Galwan Valley episode happened, people just vomited so much of anti-China on all WhatsApp groups, in fact, Zoom has been a big target, as if this is a Chinese product. And anybody using Zoom are anti-national, we had all this nonsense going on. But at the hard fact is, after the Galwan incident, after we lost 20 soldiers, 1+8 China cell phone launched in India, and within 4 days, everything was sold out. So I think we are nowhere close to Atmanirbhar in terms of the psyche of the Indian population. They need to consume. They don't care. They have no sentiment at all. You only see the sentiment being thrown in WhatsApp and social media, but they'll go back and just buy whatever is cheap, whatever is, for them to consume. Do you agree with that view?
I completely agree with you. A national consciousness strategy, national awakening has to be done in order to create this awareness. So let's understand one thing. Our people are either illiterate or our people are average educated. They don't.
Indifferent, I would say. I would say indifferent.
Yes, to some extent they are indifferent, and also to some extent they are unable to connect with the national ethos. So we need to really understand that, and we need to really reach to the people and try to convince the people that what is in the interest of India and how they should be really participating in making the new India that Prime Minister Modi is talking about, and that the process we have been building all this while. So the citizens' participation is the most important thing. If we try to understand the China's past tragedy or past trajectory, after the Cultural Revolution, each and every Chinese citizens came to a point of nation building mode. In fact, they continued to sacrifice at a multiple level. China introduced one one child policy. Many Chinese people, they stick to one child policy. So the Chinese people have also compromised at many levels. So similarly, the national consciousness in India has to be risen to the next level, and we need to create that national ethos so that people will realize the merits of making India as a powerful country over the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you.
Romy, please go ahead and ask.
Giridharji,
Yeah.
Giridharji, can we take all the questions together? Because
well, I think we are just left with 3 more people, and after that we can close it out.
Jagannath ji, namaskar. Yeah. My question is that since we can't take the Chinese territorialism and expansionism issue in our country to UNSC because of the chaotic structure of said organization, can we not take a legal recourse to ICJ since we have precedent, occupational precedent, Nicaragua versus USA and various other cases, that ICJ have declared that the country that is occupying militarily is the country that does not own stakes in that territory, but they are illegal occupants in that territory. So such a strong and specific direction has been given by ICJ. Can we not focus our efforts to go legally, which is more decisive than rather politically, as you had explained with UNSC? Thank you.
So you are talking about what particular issue here? Boundary dispute or pandemic or the membership of the...
boundary dispute, sir.
Okay. See, we cannot go to ICJ on the boundary issues at this moment. Primarily because the issue of the boundary dispute is a complicated issue. It is linked with history. It is linked with territories. It is linked with geography. So it is a very complicated issue. It is linked with the Tibetan history. Unless we really clarify our position and we have a consensus on this issue, we cannot go to ICJ. If we are approaching a legal machinery or a legal court, world court or international court of justice, then we should be clear about each and every facts on our side. Are we really ready about that? Not really. We don't have all the historical records about India-China boundary dispute, when the war happened, why the war happened, the map exchange, the LAC, what is India's actual position on this issue, on that issue. Unless we really have 100% clarification on our side, we cannot approach a court of law. So
sorry, sir. Sir, if
yes,
there was clarification, sir, if there was work, if we worked on getting the clarification as a nation, how effective of a step would it be?
Yes, I mean, this is an effective way of dealing with the issue, but then we need to also understand one thing. If we are going to International Court of Justice, there will be involvement not only ICJ, but involvement of the international other countries. Are we really prepared to allow the boundary dispute, the bilateral boundary dispute between India and China, to allow to come into a third party who would be taking a call? So that is the problematic side. Then ICJ will also be asking so many issues about Kashmir and Jammu and Kashmir. We need to really open and provide the authentic issues and documents and the data. We need to really be very particular about those issues. So it has its plus point, it has its negative points, flip sides. So before we approach the ICJ, we need to be really be clear about facts on the ground. Because once we approach the legal code, they are going to ask for more information, and then only the issue will be discussed. Unless we are in a position to provide them each and every details, I don't think ICJ is going to be doing any justice or favorable outcomes to our favor, and we should be mindful of that.
Thank you, sir.
And not just that, Romy. The point is, International Court of Arbitration gave a part of South China Sea to Philippines. What happened? China didn't care. It said, "Get lost. I'm not going to listen to it." Even if you go to ICJ, and even if assuming you get a judgment in your favor, China won't care a damn. It is a UNSC member and it's a world power. Why would it care? So legal these things and all will not work with China. We have to put the pressure points on where it hurts China. That's how we're going to make it work. Otherwise, nothing is going to work legally and all. Hogwash. What do you say, Pandaji?
I agree. Yeah. I mean, in the PSC ruling, Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling, the Chinese did not really respect. And look, after that, what they have done, they have divided the entire ASEAN communities. So I mean, we need to be really prepared, not only just to approach and preparing the facts on the ground, but also we need to prepare for the eventualities and the consequences that might arise after that. So we need to really prepare our homework. We need to do our homework properly before we approach the International Court of Justice.
Ravi Krishna ji. Yeah.
Sir, namaste.
Namaste, Ravi.
Sir, why we are still exporting iron ore and to China, and moreover, still we could not stop import of minimum. You leave about Atmanirbhar Bharat. The China's export has been might have been grown up because of this coronavirus. We are purchasing SPO meters, oximeters, BP meters, even thermometer also is from China. When will we come out of these small petty things will be produced in India?
So what's your question? Can you please briefly repeat it?
Why we are still exporting iron ore and other things, other minerals to China? Can't we consume in India by increasing our capacity to consume the major minerals?
I think it's just a part of the trading and economic context. I don't think. I mean, I don't think there is any harm in exporting iron ores to China. That's just a part of the trading and economic engagement. We are trading the same to many other countries. That should not be really limiting our choice, because this is how you generate economies through trade and economics, and that's how India should also aim to emerge as a trading economy over the next 10 years or so. So China could be one medium, but without China, we could also emerge as a trading economy, and that's what we should be really envisaging about. But saying that, I think what we should be mindful about is that whether China is opening its greater market access for Indian companies or not, and what extent it is happening, and what would be the situation in the after the post-Gulwan and post-pandemic COVID-19 phase. Are China really going to be really that open to Indian companies, open to Indian goods, Indian exports to interior part of China? That needs to be seen. If China does not really reciprocate Indian interest, then I think we need to really take a drastic, a kind of extreme decision about China. Thank you.
Yeah, Ravi Krishna ji, see, even Panda ji, this afternoon I had been to a medical store to buy something on Omron, what do you call BP apparatus and all. So I asked them, you have this digital thermometer which is being used everywhere today to check whether people have temperature or not. All the shopping malls and everybody is doing it. The medical fraternity is desperately wanting to see an Indian product. I believe some product came from Delhi, and I believe they put a pencil in that and it still showed some oxygen levels. So that is the quality of material that is coming out of India. So people have no choice but to rely on China today, and whatever products are coming from India are not reliable as of now. So we have a serious problem. We don't have an alternative to China yet. I think we'll leave it there. Let's keep watching what's going to happen. Geeta Reddy, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Namaste, Professor Pandeyji. It was a very interesting evening, and I would like to get back to the actual theme of this day's presentation of yours on how should Bharat stand up to the rising dragon. Well, the situation of China, everything is so centralized, so controlled, is so different from India. We are all aware of that. And the kind of inconsistencies, the kind of backlash you see from not just the political opposition, but also from the citizens and the civil society and the left and the minorities. And yet now we have a leader who is par excellent, and the leader and the defense forces are doing their job. But at another level, how do why the citizens and the civil society cannot respond and enable the country to stand up to the aggressive economic entry of China into not just India, but so many other nations. That is happening because we are at liberty. The sense of nationalism, national pride, and the commitment that every citizen has to make to themselves for their livelihood, as well as to sustain, develop, and increase and strengthen the economy of India, there is a lot of lacunae somewhere there. And that lacunae arises from the kind of education system which has really weakened and declined drastically, the absence of skills. I have seen the Chinese workers in Sri Lanka, I have seen the Chinese workers in Hong Kong, in Guangzhou, Guangdong province, and so many other places. And for them, work is work.
Yeah, but I mean, madam, can you be very specific in what you want to ask?
What I want is, if India, Bharat has to stand up to China. And if China is treated as a rising global power, it has its own internal problems. There is no happiness quotient within China. Whereas in India, there is a happiness quotient. But it is the economic problem, it is the political problem that India faces. Indian political problem is from within and with its neighbors because of its very soft stand.
But madam, you're not asking a question. You're making a statement. I think we should close it now. No, we are already over the time. I think if you can be very specific in your question, I think we'll close it there.
I'm not posing any question. I'm just making a statement.
Fine. I mean, this is not going to happen anytime soon, madam. I think I already made a statement. After 20 of our soldiers were killed, massacred brutally by the Chinese, our own citizens have gone and overbought, 1+8 new Chinese model of phone online. So that is your Atmanirbhar Bharat. That is the patriotism we have, and so let's leave it there. So governments can't do it, and citizens have failed it. We do not have that patriotism amongst us. I think that's a sad part of it. I think we should leave it there. We can all have views on it, but let's face the reality. Thank you, madam. Thank you. I think we'll take the last question. Sunil ji, please go ahead. I think we'll close it after this question.
Namaste, Jagannath ji. My simple question is about China's religious position, already Chinese Communist Party considered the religions, especially Christians, as a threat to the national security. So they have no good relation with the Vatican. But there is a Buddhism. Buddhism is our religion going to China. We have an old relation. If we have an anti-China feeling and we are going in the camp of US completely, that is also not good. So can there is any collaboration or possibility of a Hindu-Buddhist collaboration as per the Chinese consideration?
Okay, two things. One is that China's approach to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, China's approach to the Tibetans in Tibet, China's approach to other religious communities within China has not really been in highest order. On the other hand, if we try to see, Chinese are worried about not only about the current government, but the way India has seen its own religious communities within India, trying to unify the different religious communities. Also, the Chinese are worried about how Buddhist communities in India is also respected, including the Tibetan communities and the Dalai communities. And I think that is really worrying the Chinese. So yes, you are right. We could actually build stronger synergy between the Tibetan communities, the Buddhist communities, and the Hindu communities. This is where we are lacking. We have always emphasized on the mainstream religious communities like Hindu Muslim or Hindu Christian. We haven't really talked about those other sects or groups or religious communities where actually we could establish greater bonding primarily between Hindu and those communities. And I think that is one area where we could. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunilji. In fact, China has now created the future Buddha and laughing Buddha and all. It is not Gautam Buddha at all. They've created their own Buddha, and so they created their own Buddhism. Anyway, Chinese they have their own Pope, they have their own Dalai Lama, they have their own everything. Their religion, people who don't believe in religion, they create everything in every religion. So that's China for us. I think we will close it there. I will just ask my colleague Chandrasekhar ji to propose a word of thanks. Panda ji, I think just to give, before Chandrasekhar ji speaks, I think it was a wonderful talk. I think it was a very balanced one. It didn't, swing to emotions. In India, we have too much emotions flying in social media. In WhatsApp, there's so much of spleen is spit. But, at ground reality, it doesn't happen. Nobody's bothered. And it really is very frustrating. And like what you rightly said, I think we need to really understand China a lot in every aspect of our society. We need to have many think tanks and people really focused on China, Chinese culture, Chinese economy, Chinese politics, Chinese religions. I think you rightly said that. Unfortunately, India has not invested in China as much as we've done on Pakistan. Hopefully, your talk would inspire people here to start looking at China and then probably coming up with something else in days to come. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Chandrasekhar ji to propose a word of thanks.
Thank you, Girdhar ji. Namaskar, Dr. Panda ji. That was a real interesting evening session, sir. Thank you so much for that. Though you have started off saying that these were your personal opinions, but I think mostly these are all acceptable facts, sir. There's no doubt about that. Interestingly, you started off saying China's power is personality-centric and how fragile it is and how weakling it is. Quite an interesting thing. And so it's also true that even though India has been positively supporting China since Vajpayee's time, China's true colors it has been showing to us, and we need to understand its stance. And China government actually knows very well about India, and they're still researching about it, like you mentioned. but it projects to its own people in a different way. A lot of facts. I mean, China's aggression also, the reason why it is showing so much of aggression towards India, it's due to India's strengthening relations with so many other countries. And another factor you mentioned is like the reason also for limited and mini-scale wars, it's raging at the border. And this government is looking at India in a new light. That's also very true. And you suggested how India must take advantage of this Make in India program, and India must find its own new path to deal with China, which is a wonderful thing, and we need to really think about that. China's fall down in terms of Communist Party's fall down, that's another interesting thing. One must start thinking about it and understand it. And lastly, I mean, there are so many issues you have talked about, but I think one more important thing you talked about is the importance of issue-based pragmatism. I mean, we can't be really foolish in delinking all together in day-to-day interactions, as China is our immediate border. It's a very interesting thing, and we need to be wise. I mean, taking decisions. A lot of other things you mentioned, and you really gave us a lot of information. Thank you so much for doing that, sir. It has been a great evening, like I said already. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being with us and answering all the questions with a lot of patience. And I also take this opportunity to thank all the audience who have been supporting and who have been with us on today's call. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chandrasekharji and Giridharji. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm looking forward to
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, sir.
Sure.
Thank you. Namaste. Namaste to all, and Bharat Mata ki jai.
Bharat Mata ki jai.